Good afternoon. This is Dr. Amina Al-Din with Muslim Network TV and my program, Critical Talk. We're all listening in chunks or glued to the trial of the murderer of George Floyd. And I thought today that we would take just one piece of that when a lot of things come up in the commentary about history to look at a place that many of you may not know about, but I certainly do. And it's the American Muslim Museum. It's off the beaten track, but not off the beaten track in the minds of a lot of us. So today we're going to take a little excursion to the American Muslim Museum.
Born into a sharecropping family of 10 siblings in rural Mississippi, the idea of dignity and racial justice has long been a core value for me. My most vivid memory as a young child of 5 is my father's daring escape with our family from the plantation-like Mississippi Delta in the wee hours of the morning. Those early years of racial oppression and denial of opportunity were damaging. Yet what I found to be most destructive was the educational deficit I experienced as a result of having to work through the harvest season, which left only half the school year. But I started school from the 4th grade and never missed a day and graduated with honors. There is an inner dignity in Islam called fitra, your natural inner nature that is already programmed for excellence. One's belief in one's own ability to achieve what one sets out to do. The idea of education is at the core of what motivates this work for me. And so I've tied that to this concept of nurturing the inner dignity within our young people to unleash their human potential. For Muslims, the term dignity means inherent nobility, honor, worth, a born sense of leadership and self-governance. As you connect to the Creator, that becomes self-evident. It is clearly expressed in the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence.
I would like to introduce a little further to you Mrs. Okolo Rashid. She is currently the president and co-founder of the International Muslim Museum of Muslim Cultures. She is also the founder and director of the museum's Islamic Thought Institute. The Islamic Thought Institute is America's first Muslim museum. I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. The museum that we're going to talk about today is America's first Muslim museum, which opened in Jackson, Mississippi in April 2001. Oh my God, it's been 20 years. In January 2004, Okolo and her husband, Shababu, traveled to the Republic of Mali, West Africa, where they negotiated a partnership with the Mama Haidara Memorial Library in Timbuktu. Through this partnership, they were successful in bringing back ancient manuscripts from Timbuktu for the groundbreaking legacy of the Timbuktu exhibition to Jackson, Mississippi. I don't think we have anything from Timbuktu here in America. But anyway, Mississippi has been remarkably the housing of this place. And we'll ask her about housing it in Mississippi just a little bit later. She's featured in 2 books, Face Behind the Veil, The Extraordinary Lives of Muslim Women in America by Donna Gerke White, and Liberating Minds, Liberating Society, Black Women in the Development of American Culture and Society, edited by Lopez D. Matthews. I'm going to start with asking Okolo, who we got to see a little bit of, and we got to hear a little bit of her story of about the idea, because she began it, but hasn't had an opportunity to really tell us about the idea for this American Muslim Museum. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam, Amina. Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here, girl. So tell us about the idea. I mean, many people travel to West Africa, they go to the Chamber, but they don't get the idea for a museum.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we are excited to be the ones that have brought this amazing, we call it a miracle project from God, right, to Mississippi, or to America by way of Mississippi, right?
Yeah, okay.
So if you want me to tell you a little bit about how it got started,
Yes,
some of
please,
those,
please.
yeah, I think it's really important for Muslims to know, but also others, that the museum is really founded on a strategic alignment between the African American Muslim and the immigrant Muslim, the diverse immigrant Muslim communities, right?
Okay.
And it's our shared action that we saw from the very beginning. This museum would not have happened if it had not been for an alliance that my husband and I, we came out of the I guess people say the nationalist movement, the Black nationalist movement, the African nationalist movement, and I guess we participated in the civil rights movement in those areas as well. My husband was one of those student activists that marched with Medgar Evers, and my first experience was being among the handful of students that integrated our community college in Jackson. So we came into the Muslim movement as activists. And so what we wanted to see is what drove us to Islam and embrace Islam, and to come into really by way of the Nation of Islam, because there's a idea people understand that the our freedom struggle in America was being undermined, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on, by our American government through the FBI, COINTELPRO, and other forces, right? And we saw that destruction. We were a part of that, right? My husband and I, and so we were looking for a movement, an organization, and ideas, that we could embrace, that would where we could continue, the moral underpinning that we saw was being lost in the movement, but also, can continue our struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. And so that's how we came into the Nation of Islam at the time. But we came into it under the leadership of Imam Warthadean Muhammad, the great, transformer of the Nation of Islam. And so when we got into the movement, it was our desire to see the Islam, one God, one humanity, universal brotherhood, universal truth. We wanted to see that in action, right? And so we started to talk and interact and try to engage the greater ummah. In a lot of African American Muslim mosques, right? African American Muslim mosques, you have the diverse Muslim community will come for prayer. You can go anywhere and you'll see the diverse Muslim community, whether it's an African American, so-called, I'm quoting African American mosque because there's no such thing, right? But you would see them walk out the door every Friday and go back to their communities. We would go back to our communities. And so we really wanted to see an active, action-oriented community that shows that diversity. And so we started to organize the Muslim community, and we talked our board, a predominantly African-American board, all African Americans, because this was during the time of the transition of the Nation of Islam under Imam Muhammad. We talked that board into expanding and really restructuring itself to embrace that concept of this universal brotherhood. So we brought in an Arab, who is my partner, Imad Al-Turk, on the board of the masjid, right? We brought a Pakistani brother on. So it was delivered intentional, right? and African Americans, and we had a Sudanese brother. So from that partnership, this idea that there was a major exhibit coming to Jackson called the Majesty of Spain. You guys should have heard of that exhibit. It was a international exhibit where they had artifacts coming from the Palace of Spain. The king and queen of Spain came to Jackson, Mississippi. It was promoted as the #1 must-see exhibition in the whole country, right?
Let me stop you right here, and let me show our listening audience a little short video clip.
Okay.
I was born in 1960 to a Palestinian family. My parents migrated to Kuwait in 1952 because of the Israeli occupation of Palestine. So growing up, I understood the difficulty of being under occupation. We owned a citrus farm in Gaza, and I remember vividly the long lines at Israeli checkpoints. How humiliating that experience was, especially as a 10-year-old boy. The way Israeli soldiers treated Palestinian men, women, and children. This was my first time to realize the importance of justice and equity. I told my dad, I don't ever want to go back until Palestine is free. He just looked at me and said, always remember, be proud of your roots. My parents were both educators. I recall telling my dad one morning when I was 6 or 7 years old, I don't feel like going to school. It was the first time he ever got visibly angry with me. He told me, your job in life is to learn. As a Palestinian, you are robbed of many rights. Learning is something no one can take away from you. When I was 16, I decided to come to college in the US. So I found an organization in Kuwait that actually provides scholarships for Palestinian students. In May 1977, I was accepted to the University of Mississippi to study engineering. While at Ole Miss, I met my wife, Karen, the love of my life, and had 2 wonderful girls. I received my master's in civil engineering from Mississippi State, and I grew quickly and became COO and then president of one of the largest engineering firms in the state. I was working 60, 70 hours a week, focused on becoming more successful in the corporate world. But something was missing, and this is really when I met Okolo and Sababu. Although we arrived to have many commonalities, we came by different routes.
Assalamu alaikum. Well, I mean, we've heard 2 different stories. Many in the audiences that listen to this program are still shocked, and even though I've been there and to the museum, that there are Muslims in Mississippi. I have to admit, on my visit to Mississippi, my inner voice said, why are you in Mississippi? Everybody's trying to get out of Mississippi. You're going to Mississippi. But then I found this wonderful group of Muslims who were so warm and welcoming. It was like, oh my God, well, maybe I need to rethink this a little bit. Iman has told a story that many immigrants, the first part of the story, they will tell. It does not lead them to an allyship that is productive or successful with African Americans. Now that all of our viewing audience has met you, they may, and this is a may with a question mark, read about sharecroppers. Now they've met someone who is the daughter of a sharecropper. And what that means, and people running in the middle of the night. And these are stories which from a live voice are rarely told. And you all coming together under the banner of Islam to produce something that the nation can enjoy. And history's coming together is just awesome. But where did the idea of a museum come from? A museum, not a newspaper, not a book, not any of a bunch of other things, but a whole museum.
That's a wonderful question. Actually, actual idea came from myself and my husband. But what happened was that there was this much larger exhibition coming to Jackson called the Majesty of Spain that I was talking about a few minutes ago. And we knew it was coming. But one morning, I just happened to be looking at the promotion. We had seen it many times, but it's just, how sometimes God just direct you to something. And so they were talking about it, and they were talking about starting at 1500s or something like that, coming forward. So that means that they were leaving out the Islamic contributions. And so we thought, and we had just formed this relationship that I told you, that board, where our board had broadened and became a diverse board. So Imad, of course, being, one of the foremost experts in his field in terms of, you can give him an idea, engineers, you can give them an idea and they can write on a piece of napkins and come up with how you're going to do it, right? And so we were able to take that idea to him, and we started to organize. We brought in people, from around the city, people, diverse group of people, broad-based, talking about this exhibit coming to Jackson, and they weren't going to do anything on the Islamic era. They were just going to start with European history and go forward. So we really call the museum an activist moment. And I think that part of that activism is like, we hear this a lot, a challenge presents opportunity, right? So we see it as the challenge, because that group, we initially approached them about maybe doing a theme in their exhibit.
Right.
But they didn't want that. So we just created a companion exhibit, right? We created a companion exhibit called the Islamic Moorish Spain as a Legacy to Europe and the West.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the struggles of putting what is fabulous together. Okay. A quick break. This is Dr. Amina Al-Din. I am talking with Okolo Rashid, who is a co-founder of the one and only, people out there listening, American Muslim Museum of Cultures. I am so excited. We'll be right back.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me!
No justice!
No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
This is Dr. Amina Al-Din with Okolo Rashid, who's the president and co-founder of the American Muslim Museum. By the way, it's in Jackson, Mississippi. And we're having a really informative talk, not only about its founding, but what it enables folk to do in terms of not only educating about the similarities and the struggles of culture, but the struggles in Mississippi, the struggles of seeding Islam in this country. And Okolo, I really want to go to the struggles of having a Muslim museum in Jackson, Mississippi. And I say that with my brow all scrunched up because it's the last place on earth people would expect an American Muslim museum, but also a successful one.
Alhamdulillah. Well, thank you, Amina. Let me just be clear about the museum. First of all, it's the International Museum of Muslim Cultures. There is another American Muslim Museum, in DC, but the International Museum of Muslim Cultures was America's first Islamic history and culture museum. So that's why you call it America's Museum. And I just want to make sure, because Amir might be upset with us, because I think his museum is called the American Muslim Museum.
Okay, all right.
Amir Muhammad. We love
Amir.
Beautiful person.
Amir, forgive me if you're out there listening.
But anyway, I guess the challenge would be that, we're in Mississippi,
Exactly.
Where are you going to get funding, to start a museum? Where are you going to get the real expertise, right? But that's why we call it a miracle project. But like I said, it's that unique coming together of these two alliances, right? Someone with expertise, someone with the commitment. These are the kind of elements that we're going to need for building strong Muslim institutions, right? And then you have on the other side activism and the tenacity to believe that you can do anything you want to do if you just put your mind to it and just move toward it. So we were able to bring those forces together, and so that was, of course, a challenge. But I think that the biggest challenge came that we opened in April. This new exhibit that I told you about, the Majesty of Spain, it opened in March of 2001, and we opened in April of 2001. 2001, remember? And we were going to close in October of 2001. But what happened in September?
Right.
9/11 happened, right? And so that's when the real challenge came, because prior to that, it was just an anonymity. Everybody was just, amazed with this major exhibit that came. They had over 600,000 people that came to this other exhibit, but many of their visitors came to our exhibit. And they were telling us that this other exhibit was great, but ours was more substantive, right? And they encouraged us to continue, And of course, when 9/11 happened, we had a challenge. We had to decide whether we were going to close our doors because somebody threw a brick in our window, right? The next day after 9/11, and so, but we, with God's help, we had the mayor, who was the first African American mayor that had been elected in the city of Jackson, did a fundraiser for the museum, right?
Wow.
We had the former governor of he was a Democratic governor, but the former governor was our keynote speaker, right? So in the midst of the challenge, we had people to come together. Educators brought their students to the museum after 9/11 because they said that they wanted their students to learn in an educational environment, not what they were seeing on TV. Even ministers brought their congregation. So even though we had this challenge, with challenge comes opportunity. And people really mobilized and really supported the museum. And that's why we're still there today, because they don't see it as that Muslim museum over there somewhere. They see it as, we have a Muslim museum in Mississippi.
Exactly, which is what I'm jumping up and down about. Well, I think that had to have been an awesome challenge. But I want to know more about how you all go about educating elementary school children, high school kids, and then the college crowd.
Right. Our approach is both K through 16 education and teacher professional development training, but also it's educating the public. So we have two tracks. Right. And I'd like to quote one of the scholars. We have a scholars team, which you are really a part of our scholars team. And so we have the scholars team that's on our list. And whenever we need these great scholars, we just call them in, right? Like you came to our conference several years back. So anyway, Dr. Steve Smith said the museum has emerged in our city, to be a great home base for Islamic studies.
Right.
Historical African American studies because of the Timbuktu exhibit, and a place for healthy interfaith dialogue and civic engagement. So that's how he defined the museum. So that's because of the programming that we have. We have these great exhibits. We create our programming around our exhibitions. So we had the Moorish Spain exhibition that came as a companion exhibition to that Majesty of Spain that brought all of the stuff from Europe and didn't want to do anything about its Islamic contribution. And then, of course, my husband and I, as you read earlier, we got an opportunity to go to Mali, West Africa, and we were able to develop the partnership with Mama Haidara Memorial Library to bring ancient African manuscripts to America by way of Mississippi. One journalist, they said that we pulled, our museum, our young fledgling museum pulled a coup on the Muslim, on the museum community by bringing, these documents that nobody even, that weren't even talking about, right? No. And so our programming, our robust programming is designed around these kinds of exhibitions. Our two featured, what we call our signature exhibitions, is the Legacy of Timbuktu exhibition, which is about the great contributions of great scholarship, wealth, and empire building of West Africa before they were West Africans were brought over and enslaved in America. So this is that history that connects us, right? And then we have another part of our program is around our other signature exhibition called The Covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians, Jews, and others, right? And so we have copies in that covenant exhibit. We have copies of ancient covenants and treaties that the Prophet Muhammad signed to build this pluralistic interfaith community during the time that he established the first Islamic State. So that's what that exhibition is about. So our programming is around that, and we do public programming where we bring scholars in like yourselves and others, where we also have a curriculum that we piloted in the Jackson Public School system. That's awesome. Yeah, and another rural school district with great support from Kellogg Foundation. I just want to and others, Pillars Foundation and others.
Right. Yay for Pillars and Kellogg. But I want to take you back for a moment before we go to break to Timbuktu. They had in National Geographic, and I'm trying to think, maybe several other magazines, the discovery of all these manuscripts that Muslim scholars had buried underneath the sand to keep other Muslims who didn't want this, that, and the other around, but they had buried them, which kept them in pristine condition. And they knew, of course, what happens when the colonizer gets hold of your stuff. So they were bringing them out very carefully, trying to do it without big fanfare because they knew that people would descend. So I can see why you all getting an alliance with them was quite a coup for the museum community. But Timbuktu is like this exotic place that exists in our imagination. It's a real place where there were scholars writing and copying manuscripts and doing all of these things that young and old need to get an opportunity to see. So how many manuscripts were you able to get?
Well, right now we have 39 ancient manuscripts and documents on display in the Legacy of Timbuktu exhibition. And we are in partnership with, Abdul Qadir, our partner, to really not only house those that we have there at the museum, but we're developing a traveling component of the Timbuktu exhibition. We would have been traveling this in 2020 had we had begun to establish partnerships. So we'll be traveling another additional 25 in addition to the ones that we have. across the country so that we know that everybody's not going to come to Mississippi, even though they're missing a great experience. But we want to get it all across America. So we will be traveling it as well as our Covenant exhibition across the country. Sure.
Well, also, before we go to break, I just want to remind the audience that the maintenance of fragile documents is expensive. If you ever really wanted to donate to something, please think about sending some of those dollars their way. I learned of this because we have an Islam in America archive, and that maintenance, the temperature controls, the keeping the dust mites at bay, all of those things cost more than you could ever know. So anything you send that way for the support of their effort with the Timbuktu manuscripts, but other manuscripts from places near and far, and also American spaces, please think about it. Muslim Network TV has gone out of its way to put together ways to advertise these places that we say, oh no, I didn't know about that. But also check out Muslim Network TV during Ramadan to see how you can help a much needed, a little bit late, but never better late than never effort across the country. This is Dr. Amina Al-Din. I am talking with Okolo Rashid, who just corrected me. It's the International Museum. Guys, I'm getting old, having COVID brain fatigue. And we're having a wonderful time getting some wonderful information. We'll be right back.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is very smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
This is Dr. Amina Al-Din with Muslim Network TV, and I am speaking with the president and co-founder of the International Muslim Museum, and that is based in Jackson, Mississippi. And I have learned that, and as I was thinking about that while you said it, that was a place who could you got more support after 9/11 than many people did in what we want to consider these liberal north of the Mason-Dixie line places. So myself, slap in the mouth, and for the rest of you talking about Jackson, Mississippi, slap in the mouth, because they have done such an awesome, just ongoing, almost 20 years worth of pulling it together. And so if we can't do anything else, we need to applaud this gigantic effort. So now in our remaining minutes, I want you to tell us about what you got up your sleeve? What is the new programming? What do you think you're going to do?
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about what we have up our sleeves, what we got on the hot. All right. We've been doing the research for these 20 plus years, 20 years plus, plus a few months. But anyway, we've been building on much of the work that we've already been doing. And what we've come up with is a project, it's called Racial Equity. We're looking at racial equity, but we're also looking at how do we address this particular moment that we're in, right? This racial reckoning, or reckoning, not just racial, but it is a racial reckoning, but it's a reckoning that's taking place in America. How do you address that? The president has called for, an effort to save the soul of America, right? And we have all these other efforts. Let's do something. So we have come up with this idea because we've studied the civil rights movement and the African American Muslim movement as parallel movements for one freedom struggle. And our studies have shown us that, and Imam Muhammad, he talked about there were two leaders. That's what kind of helped us to kind of go in this direction. He talked about even though we lost our struggle for racial dignity and freedom, justice, and equality, really, that's why we keep having these reckonings or having these, people in the streets, right? It's because we haven't really resolved the issue. And so his thing was that there are two men that best represented the extreme pose of what we wanted in this country. And that was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. His strives for the inner dignity, right, that has been stripped away from African Americans, right? And Dr. Martin Luther King, whose struggle was for civil rights. So we started to kind of look at and kind of go back and do some research, preliminary research. We're asking scholars to do a more fuller dive into that. But what we come up with is that the transformative movement that Dr. King led, called the Civil Rights Movement, he transformed it into a human rights movement, embracing, he said that this Civil Rights Movement had to go beyond loyalties just within the borders. It had to go beyond the borders. It had to go beyond race. It had to go beyond class, right? It had to embrace one brotherhood. Martin Luther King said that, right? So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad established, this dignity thing, but it was Imam Worthaddeen Muhammad that came in and took and built on the foundation, removed all of those things that were not really significant and could really undermine our movement for racial dignity, freedom, justice, and equality. And he transformed the old Nation of Islam into Orthodox Islam. So those two movements, we're saying that they actually converged. The ideologies converged to create what we're calling a religious-based social justice model, right? And so we're putting forward our example of this religious-based social justice model that actually plugs into, we said one freedom movement, there's only one freedom movement. And that one freedom movement was revived by the Prophet Muhammad. It goes back to the Prophet Muhammad. It goes back to prophets from the beginning of time. And we call it a pluralistic, universal prophetic model that Imam Muhammad and Dr. King, their transformation converged into that, which is grounded in the Prophet Muhammad's freedom movement. And what was his freedom movement? What did Prophet Muhammad bring in terms of that universal pluralistic model? One God. We're not going to solve racism and equity in this country or across the globe until we understand that there's an intersectionality between government and policy. between all of these other institutions. And so our position is we just want to help to shift the narrative or change the narrative so that it can embrace religious ideas and utilize this particular model to help to show Americans you don't have to become Muslim to America has always embraced great ideas. So
Right.
we as Muslims have a responsibility, we think, to get behind this particular model. We've been waiting as Muslims. We wanted, what platform, can we launch our movement, the Muslims, and make a contribution to the reckoning in America. We're saying that we can do that by doing the research on this concept, of this idea of how the civil rights movement and the African American movement cannot be separated. Malcolm said, he said that you cannot look at the civil rights movement, he called it the freedom movement, right, without acknowledging the contributions of the African American Muslim. He said the African American Muslim brought what's the word? Activism, but this idea of standing up. You got someone like Malcolm, and you got someone like Muhammad Ali and others. That actually represented that transformation, but standing up for the dignity, not just civil rights, but for the dignity of African American people, as a whole, and the need for nurturing that.
So that's your big program on your platter, huh?
That is our big program, and we are seeking funding. We are right now have been accepted in the initial stages of a major multi-million-dollar program. There's about 4 different stages that you got to go through, but that's one of the possibilities. But we're looking for supporting funding. We're looking for opportunities to present just more about just this initiative. And we call it a movement. It's not just an initiative.
Right.
We feel like this will catalyze the movement that is existing, because we see that if we have got to get people to see, in terms of changing this narrative, that if there's only one freedom movement, then Black Lives Matter is a part of that movement. Immigrants' rights is a part of that movement. It connects into that one movement. The struggle against Islamophobia, right? Mm-hmm. It's only one movement. Indigenous people.
The only people that could do it is a museum, which can have us see the dots, see the connections. You just got me hopped up here. This has been the fastest 50 minutes on record. I am so appreciative of your taking your time to talk with me this afternoon. That it's raining in here in Chicago, I can now ignore it because I got something else to think about. I want to give you our wholehearted, warmest thanks from Muslim Network TV. This is Dr. Amina Al-Din, and I have spent, as I said, the quickest 50 minutes learning all this stuff that I wasn't too sure I knew with Okolo Rashid, who is the president and co-founder of the International Museum of Muslim Cultures. This has been exquisite. I gotta think about a way that we can get some pictures or some moving video of the museum so that we can do a virtual tour in the future. I thank you from Muslim Network TV and, of course, Critical Talk, and we'll talk again soon.